Filming The Lord of the Rings was a mammoth undertaking. No expense was spared to bring Tolkien's world to life, and every attention to detail was paid to make the films feel as authentic as possible. Well, almost. And so with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, and here are 10 movie mistakes they hoped you missed in Lord of the Rings. Number 10. Éomer's sword falls out. One reason this movie felt so authentic was that many of the props looked real, and that's because in many cases they were real. Although many of the actors used safety swords for the fight scenes, each major character was given a version dubbed the Hero Sword. These were real steel weapons forged by a master armorer. It would take about a week to craft just one, and if you think about how many significant characters have swords, that's a lot of hammer-striking steel. Viggo Mortensen would try to use his hero sword as often as possible, knowing the feel and the weight of the weapon would cause him to tire over time and therefore sell his performance. And it certainly worked. Any close-ups of those weapons were flawless. Well, all except one. In the scene when Aragorn, Gimli and Legolas meet Éomer, it's painfully obvious that something odd is happening with Éomer's weapon. As he mounts his horse, the camera pans up, catching his sword sliding from its sheath. What's worse, the camera seems to linger on the error, almost rubbing it in your face. Number 9. Pippin reties his bonds. Although we are constantly told Aragorn is a ranger during the Fellowship of the Ring, it isn't until the Two Towers that we really see him putting those Dunedain skills into practice. During the early stages of the second movie, Aragorn, Legolas and Gimli are forced to run day and night in hopes of tracking down the party of Uruk-hai who captured Merry and Pippin. After their encounter with Éomer, the three hunters are driven almost to despair when they believe the hobbits perished along with their captors. That is until Aragorn spots something and the viewer is taken on a step-by-step account of how those intuitive little hobbits made their escape. Pippin is shown narrowly avoiding the pounding hooves of a warhorse. Aragorn then exclaims the hobbits' hands were bound before finding evidence that they freed themselves. Both hobbits are then shown frantically cutting their bonds on an orc blade before heading into the forest. The only thing is, in the earlier scene of Pippin rolling away from the horse, his hands are already freed. Now, either this indicates that Aragorn got the sequencing wrong in his head, or it was a simple case of the editor overlooking a key detail in the scene. Number 8. Legolas's arrows change colour. When it comes to great archers in Middle-earth, no one is as skilled or deadly with a bow as Legolas. In the Fellowship, he defeated a cave troll utilising his inhuman acrobatic abilities. In the Two Towers, he used an orc shield as a makeshift skateboard while firing arrows with a deadly accuracy. And then in The Return of the King, he managed to take down Umuma single-handedly. But in one scene during the Two Towers, Legolas manages to do something that defies even his elven ability. We all remember that tense moment when the Uruk-hai berserker, bearing a flaming torch, sprints into the tunnel beneath a deeping wall to blast a hole in the defences. As Aragorn screams for Legolas to bring him down, we see several shots of the elf prince drawing his bow before losing arrows into the orc. But the feathers used to fletch Legolas's arrows appear to change from brown-yellow to white between shots. What's more, the feathers are a completely different shape. Number 7. Furthest away from home by car. One of the biggest, metaphorically speaking, heroes in the trilogy was the somewhat simple-minded but ever-faithful hobbit Samwise Gamgee. Despite having little life experience outside his comfortable existence in the Shire, Sam proved to be Frodo's most valuable companion. In an early scene, we get a touching moment when Sam pauses, noting to Frodo that if he takes one more step, it will be the furthest away from home he's ever been. But in the original theatrical cut, some viewers were distracted from the moving scene by a car trundling over the hill in the background. This was eventually spotted by the filmmakers and removed from the extended and Blu-ray editions. Number 6. Arwen can be spotted at Helm's Deep. The script for The Lord of the Rings was changed almost on a daily basis, and even during the editing process, Peter Jackson still didn't have his narrative nailed down. Whole sequences that had been filmed were removed, but every so often, evidence of those sequences made their way into the final cut. Early on in the production process, Peter Jackson realised it would be difficult to sell the love between Aragorn and Arwen if they didn't interact for the entire second movie. The decision was taken to have Arwen accompany the small elf army to Helm's Deep. Liv Tyler filmed entire sequences at Helm's Deep showing off her elven blade skills. Ultimately, however, it was decided this was too much of a departure from Tolkien's original work. Jackson devised the dream flashback sequence of the two characters instead to remind viewers of their relationship. The footage of Arwen and Helm's Deep was cut, except for one subtle shot. After Éomer rides to the rescue of the king, we see Aragorn and the rest doing battle outside the Hornburg. And for a split second, you can see Arwen upon her horse chopping down with her sword. Number 5. Aragorn loses his sword twice. Throughout the trilogy, our main heroes make mincemeat out of the orcs they come up against. If it hadn't been for that troll in Moria, the Fellowship would have seen off those pesky little goblins with ease. And even when they went up against the Uruk-hai, they seemed to have a pretty easy time of it. Sure, Boromir died at their hands, but he took down dozens before he finally succumbed to their arrows. One-on-one, the orcs pretty much had no chance. So when Lurtz, the snarling brute who killed Boromir, was able to hold his own against Aragorn, we actually felt a little fearful for our main characters. Of course, Aragorn eventually won his duel, but not before a few tense moments. He's thrown against a tree before being pinned by the orc's spiked shield and almost losing his head. The force of the initial impact caused Aragorn's sword to fly from his hand, but less than a second later, he's shown with his sword again. As Lurtz throws his shield, Aragorn is then pinned against the tree and we see his sword once more go spinning out of frame. Number 4. Frodo's changing scar. Continuity can be a bitch. On huge productions like this, it's someone's job to look out for continuity issues. This might extend to making sure a character has the same costume on from scene to scene, or might just be making sure actors hit the correct mark during each retake, but inevitably things slip through. During the final showdown on Mount Doom, Frodo gets a giant cut on the side of his face, but when he enters the mountain, the cut changes cheeks. The explanations for this is most likely down to the mixed shooting schedule. It was often the case that scenes from the same sequence were filmed at different times over the course of production, and in that time the makeup team simply forgot which cheek Frodo had injured. Seems like a rookie error though. Number 3. Éomer got lost and sent his double. Throughout the trilogy, dozens of stunt and scale doubles were used as stand-ins. When it came to capturing the difference in size of certain characters, people of shorter stature were used in wide shots to sell the scene. But even characters of standard size were required to use doubles in particularly dangerous stunts. It's understandable, right? You couldn't have an untrained actor galloping on a horse at high speed. Insurance would cost a bomb. But every now and then, the stunt doubles were used in scenes where it didn't necessarily make sense. After the Battle of Helm's Deep, the surviving defenders climb to the top of a hill in order to survey the distant mountains of Mordor. But the scene is somewhat undercut by the very visible inclusion of Éomer's stunt double. During the director's commentary, Peter Jackson admits that they simply never got round to pasting Karl Urban's head into the shot. Jackson then joked that in his mind, this is just a generic commander of Rohan called George. Number 2. The Lothlórien tree has no top. During the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo and his companions enter the mysterious land of Lórien. It was one of the most enchanting and idyllic looking spots in all of Middle-earth. If you're going to pick somewhere to go for a little Middle-earth R&R, Lórien would be the place. It was home to the Malorn, huge and ancient trees with silver-grey bark that stretch high into the sky. Obviously, New Zealand doesn't have Malorn trees dotted about the place, nor did they have big enough trees to act as stand-ins. Instead, the crew constructed huge, realistic-looking bases that stretched a mere 6 feet high, but would be extended with the use of CGI. During the Fellowship's departure scene, you can see this impressive tree in all its glory. But in an earlier wide shot, the editor forgot to extend it. You can clearly see a constructed tree base that barely reaches the height of the puny trees around it. Number 1. During the EDORAS wide shot, smoke goes backwards. In order to create the land and cityscapes of Middle-earth, Peter Jackson used a number of techniques. Keen to use CGI as little as possible, he instructed Weta Workshop to create vast, detailed miniatures of the key location. They were built with such attention to detail that a camera could sweep over them and they would appear as the real thing. But Jackson also built many sets on location. The capital of Rohan, Edoras, was partially constructed in the windy Rangitata Valley in the South Island. The Golden Hall of Theoden was built on top of a huge rocky hill, and portions of the wall and many houses were constructed around it. Jackson wanted a sense of authenticity for the huge sweeping helicopter shots, so he even lit fires in the chimneys to create the sense of a lived-in city. When it came to editing the film together, however, the decision was made to reverse several shots to give some variety to the camera movements, but it seems someone forgot about the smoke. If you look closely in the extended version of the film, an early shot of Edoras shows the chimney sucking in smoke rather than expelling it. And that concludes our list. If you can think of any other examples, then please do let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.